Now let's look at the directives in both Angular and Next.js. So this directive concept is there in both these frameworks. So let's start with the Next.js. Okay, so the one that you are seeing on this particular page, use client, this is one of the directive, and there is one more directive called use server. So by default, Next.js components are server side rendered components. That means every component is going to be rendered on the server, and upon the request it will be sent to the client and displayed on the page. Okay, and where these server side components are going to be automatically pre-rendered on the server when we actually build the application, so that the performance of the application is going to be much faster instead of directly coming onto the browser and rendering onto the parsing and rendering onto the browser. So if you want to make any component in, if you don't mention this, okay, so by default it will become a server side component. So now if you add this use client, that means it is a client side component. So the client side component is on the build time. For the first time, this particular component is going to be rendered on the server only, but when it is rendered onto the browser, some subsequent request onwards, it will be rendered only on the browser. It won't make a connection to the server to render this particular page. Okay, so for server you can use use server. Okay, so these are the two attributes that these are the two directives that we have in Next.js. Okay, now let's go to Angular and write these directives. So in Angular point of view, there are three type of directives. So the first one is component. Okay, Angular, this is one of the important feature for Angular, and the two-way data binding feature working because of the directives only. Okay, so the first one is component based directive. So every component in Angular, if you see, it will be annotated with this particular directive, which is @component. So component, the directive in Angular point of view, it will enhance or it will add some additional feature to the existing HTML page or existing HTML components or existing HTML elements like div tag and p tag and all. So in Angular, even though this particular component also it will render some HTML onto the page, so for that reason, even the component also one type of a special directive in Angular. This is the first one, and there is a second one which is of structural directive. So structural directives are like a ng for loop or ng if loop, and let me just show this. So in this page where we previously loaded these states on the page, right? So this particular ng for that you are seeing, this is one of the structural directive which will perform some action on the DOM and it will manipulate the DOM. So for that reason, ng for or @for is Angular 17 version type. Otherwise, previously we used to have ng for. Okay, so this one or ng if condition or @if condition. So all these are structural directives. Okay, and there is something one more thing that we already used in the login form. Okay, in this login form, okay, right now we used form control, but usually if you use ng, there is one more way to create the Angular form using ng model. So ng model also one more type of structural directive. Okay, so there is one, the third category is attribute directive. Okay, attribute directive in this code we have not used it yet. So let's create a directive, attribute directive, and use it in this particular app component.html, so that you will get to know what exactly is attribute directive. Okay, so to create a directive in Angular, again I'm using the command line ng generate directive and say directive name color. It will create two files. Okay, directive spec file and the directive file, it will make an entry of this directive into the app module. Okay, So now if you see the directive, this is a color directive. Okay, so this is the app color that we are going to use. Okay, now let me just add a p tag saying okay. So to use the directive, we have to use it like this without hash. If you add a hash, it will become ID. So if you want to use the directive, this is how you have to mention in the HTML. This is what you need to do to use the directive. Okay, but to change this color on this particular text before rendering, we need to go to the, so when this particular app component is rendered onto the page, this particular p tag, since it is attached with the directive, it will go to directive.ts file. Okay, okay, now it is black color. Okay, now let's go to the directive. So within this directive, usually we get a specific element reference. So wherever it is used, okay, element meaning this particular reference, this p tag reference you will get here. Okay, within this particular constructor, you can get hold of the element and you can perform some action on top of this to provide the directive feature to it. Okay, so you need to get hold of the native element, and now let's change the color of this to red color when it is rendered. Okay, let's check. Now if you see, even though the color is not mentioned in the HTML, but because of this directive, before rendering this, it went to directive, got the element reference which is of p tag, this one. Okay, and it applied the style and the color. Okay, this is how you can apply the color. Okay, and you can not only this, you can perform many more activities on that particular element. Even if you want to, when you want to change something on the mouse over scenario. Okay, so the host listener that we need to get hold of, and on this mouse over event. Okay, on this particular mouse over, so what we can do is, okay, within this we can get hold of the element dot native element dot, we can, when the user mouse over on this, let's change the color to green. Expected identifier. Okay, oh, okay, it should be on mouse over. Okay, that function can be anything. Now if you see on the page load, it is red color. As soon as when I mouse over, it turned into green. Okay, because of this host listener in the directive. Okay, this is how you can use the directive in Angular. Okay, so that's all about these directives.